Hey guys, how's it going? Kripp here. So I've been wanting to make a Control Wizard guide for some time now, but I haven't really had the opportunity here just because I've been banned for the last few days. But Control Wizard in Neverwinter is probably the way to go if you're trying to maximize your fun, especially if you enjoy knocking monsters off cliffs, because that's largely what you do. You do debuff the monsters, you dance around, you teleports, and you throw all the monsters down in the pits. And it's really cool. So I want to show you guys how I built my wizard. It is a little bit different than how others have built their wizards, so you have to keep that in mind. Perhaps it's not the best spec out there, but I think it is, so that's probably worth something, and at least you guys can learn a few things from me. So here we go. So when I was first making the wizard, I thought it'd be really good to get a lot of crit, because charisma is really sweet. It gives you combat advantage damage, which is damage when you're attacking from like the sides or the back. I don't really know exactly, but it can also trigger from certain skills. And you got all the other stuff with the cooldown reduction. Pretty much, originally I went with all int and all charisma, while trying to maximize charisma just for higher crit. But now that I'm higher level, especially for PvE, I realized that charisma is actually not very good at all, because critting doesn't really matter. What matters is recharging your abilities as often as possible. So to maximize that, you want intelligence, which gives you a damage bonus and a recharge speed increase, and wisdom, which is action point gain and recharge speed increase, and the other one doesn't really matter too much. So that's really good. As far as the stats go, power is fine, ups your damage, and because your action points are generated from skills as well as from damage, that's part of your action point gain. Crit is not very good because you have Eye of the Storm, which gives you 100% chance to crit if it procs, so marginalizes the crit chance, on top of the fact that crit diminishes around 1,000 pretty steadily. Armor Pen is fairly useless because you have so many things that debuff the monster's armor that Armor Pen gets marginalized just from that. And Recovery is the best stat possible, just because you get a lot more action points and you get a lot more recharge on your skills. And the reason I say this is because the wizard, the way I play it, is I feel kind of like a support role, where knocking monsters off cliffs gives me damage, and having more power, having more crit doesn't really matter. It matters a little bit because you do damage with your abilities, you do damage with your shield burst, so you get more action points. But ideally, the goal is to cast Arcane Singularity and combo it with a shield pop as often as possible. And to do this, Recovery is all you really need. Recovery, as you can tell, just gives you recharge speed and action point gain, similar to what Wisdom does. Recovery seems to diminish pretty heavily at around 4k, but after realizing that all the other stats are complete trash, I just went with the Recovery. Why not? Let's try it. And I have to say, the idea of going all in on Recovery is pretty cool. I think it is worth it after trying it. The other stats don't really matter. Regeneration is pretty nice for PvP, but PvP is just kind of like for lulz right now, so it doesn't really matter. But as you can tell, all of my fun little bonuses without the +1 fire buff, and I think I have like 1 or 2 gifts, I don't know, just from praying recently, gives me a recharge speed increase of 52% and action point gain of 40%. As far as gear goes, I'll show you guys what's needed, but it's really not that much. What is really important is that you get one of these pets that transfer the stats to you. I believe the cat pet currently does this, but I believe the cat pet doesn't actually say on the cat itself that it's supposed to give you the stats. So what I recommend is you get an Ion Stone of Allure. You get an Ion Stone of Allure for Zen, but you can buy Zen for diamonds when the shit decides to come back up. So eventually you can get it. And for my pet, because it's purely PvE, I went with maxed out Recovery, and this pet gives me all his stats. This is why this pet is so cool. So you get the Arcane Runestones for Recovery, and more stats transferred to owner. And as for the gear, you get Recovery stacked blue gear. And to search this on the auction house, you search for blue gear with offensive sockets, with putting into the description of Respite. Respite is stacked Recovery. That's what that means. It's like a Recovery on top of the other stats. So you get an Occult. Occult, I believe, is crit Recovery, and Respite is stacked Recovery, potentially stacked Recovery, because you can get a prefix that doesn't have Recovery, so it'll be like the Recovery stack, but without the base Recovery. So that's kind of how I look at it. But the Occult Ring of Respite is the crit Recovery with the stacked Recovery, And the Blessed is, I think, ideally what you'd want because it's power and stack recovery. And power, I think, is better than Kripp because when you get Eye of the Storm, it's not marginalized. You guys already know. And that's pretty much it. You go for the crazy recovery blues, and you try to socket it with recovery gems. My pet gives me probably close to 2,000 recovery, given the charisma bonus. Alright, so the rest of the gear doesn't really matter. I use High Vizier 4-piece, but you know, it's marginal. Prior to that, I was using Masters of Respite for boots and helmet, and I was using the Gladiator 2-piece for chest and gloves. And using the 2-piece for chest and gloves is really good because it gives you the 400 recovery 2-piece. When you use High Vizier, it gives you 450, but you know, 400 is pretty much the same thing. The Gladiator set is insane for Wizard. I really just recommend that you get the gloves and the chest for Gladiator, not worry about it, and get these 2 pieces when the auction decides to come back up for, you know, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 astral damage. This is very cheap stuff. You don't have to enchant it very well. Oh man, I'm getting trolled right now. Alright, let's get out of here. You don't have to enchant it too much, you know, just whatever goes. The enchants for the utility slots don't matter at all. The enchants for the rest, it does matter. You want to get the offensive sockets, you want to get that extra recovery. And as far as the rest of the gear, it's really not that important. I still use a tier 1 weapon. The enchant is important. You want to get a Plague Fire enchant. I don't plan to get another Plague Fire enchant for that weapon because I have the greater Plague Fire. I'm saving this for when I find the Castle Never weapon. Basically, the Plague Fire enchant procs a ton of small hits, and the ton of small hits are really cool, and because they proc your other stuff. If you want to get Tenebrous, if you want to get like Storm Power, but on top of that, it also debuffs the monster's mitigation, which is very important because you're a support character. You want to buff the damage of your group, and using this enchant accomplishes that task very well. So it doesn't really matter what kind of weapon you use. You can even use the PvP weapon. It's pretty close to the one that I have. Enchant it with recovery, enchant it with the Plague Fire enchant. Offhand doesn't matter, try to get a recovery one. The jewelry doesn't really matter. I actually like to think that this is actually the best type of jewelry where you get power and stack recovery, but crit and stack recovery is probably also another good option. The rest is just like kind of whatever. I use the epic one. This is from the vendor. This thing was like 40k. You know, getting the tri-stat, the power crit recovery is fine. If you want to get the blues, if you see a good price for the blues, get the blues. Socket recovery, it doesn't really matter. The belt is always going to be blue because all the epic belts have defensive sockets, and defensive socket does not help you as much as that extra recovery would. As far as the shirt and pants, try to get yourself a pair. The pants don't really matter if you get the socketed one, but the chest does matter because you get an offensive socket, and an offensive socket you can get an additional 220 recovery, or more if you try to get a gem over level 8. So pretty cool stuff there. As far as the powers, I had to show you guys real quickly what I got, but I'll just highlight what's important for PvE. So Magic Missile is your primary spammable attack. That's very important. Chill Strike doesn't really matter. It's good for leveling, it's good for PvP. Ice Storm, the same thing. Conduit of Ice is very important because when you go to the feats, I'll explain this later, but Silent Force gives you mitigation drop when you hit something with Conduit of Ice. So you got to get that. It's extra AoE. It's very cool. Singularity is your main daily, and Oppressive Force I like to use as my secondary daily because it dazes all of the monsters around you. So if you're about to wipe, you can save them with this ability only. Arcane Singularity will not have its effect right away. This will. It's not as powerful, but if you really need a few seconds to stay alive with your team, that's the ability to use. It's a good idea to max out Entangling Force and Repel because on certain fights you may need to knock back a few monsters, and combining these abilities is very good for accomplishing that. Shield is your primary ability. Shield just triggers like an armor buff. It absorbs some damage and it resets every 6 seconds, but if you pop it, it does an AoE, and because the AoE hits unlimited targets, it's absurdly overpowered. Shield, for some reason, generates much more action points than any other ability that you have. I don't really know why, but it seems that abilities in this game have like a base action point gain per target hit, and then there's an additive bonus of the damage that you do. So if you crit, you get a little bit more, but just the fact that you hit a bunch of targets with your shield pop generates an unbelievable amount of action points, regardless of the damage that you may be putting out with it. Maxing out Evocation is really important. It's the second passive that I use for 15% more area damage. Again, area damage gives you action points. Icy Terrain, I recently got this ability, and I think it's absurdly overpowered, so try to max that out. Sudden Storm is not really important, I just max it up because I had nothing else to do. Storm Pillar, again, I mostly just use this to charge my action points. Raven Enfeeblement is important for single target fights. You can use Raven Enfeeblement on your primary tab slot, and the rest of your group will do insane single target damage during the time of which you're using this ability twice. The reason I say that is the ability has 2 charges, and you should never use 1 charge, because when you use it in your Spellmaster, it says get an additional charge, and if recast placed on time. If recast on the same target twice, it will double the effectiveness of the debuffs. So if you only cast the ray once in your tab slot, it's useless. You may as well not be there. So you have to save it until you get 2 charges and then double pop it. And it can be really cool. Ice Knife is for PvP. Storm Spell is actually pretty decent for PvE. You can replace Eye of the Storm if you want with it, but you know, I like Eye of the Storm, so it doesn't really matter. Steal Time is one of the best abilities that you have. It slows all the monsters when you're casting it, and if you manage to finish the cast, it will stun all of them. And I don't believe it has a target cap, and it gives you combat advantage if you put it in your tab slot. And combat advantage gives you extra damage, and it gives you run speed, and it shares this buff with your allies. That's why I use it in my tab slot, so my allies do extra damage. And you want to get Eye of the Storm over there. As far as the feats go, this is my lineup. I think Control Action may actually be more powerful than I give it credit. I think it may be worth getting 5 points in this. I just didn't really know what else to take points out of. The reason this is so good is because when you're doing your combo, when you see a lot of monsters, so you want to throw them off the cliff, you're going to use Arcane Singularity, which is your Ultra, and you're going to, you know, while that thing is sucking the monsters in, you're going to stun them all with Steal Time, and then you're going to punt them off with Shield. And because Shield gives you the most action points, and because they're all going to be stunned from Steal Time, Controlling Action is going to literally give you absolutely free action points when you execute your combo perfectly. So it's very good stuff. You know, the rest is just kind of like whatever, like bonus chance to crit. You know, maybe you want to put those points there. But the rest is pretty standard. Reduce your cooldowns by 10%. Your area powers deal more damage. You deal more arcane damage. Your area powers deal more damage. Yeah, pretty standard stuff. As far as the trees go, you have the 3 trees here. The middle one is easily the best one. Tempest Magic is you know, pretty good, just a little bit extra damage. Malevolent Surge, I like to get this over Destructive Wizardry. Some people like Destructive Wizardry, but I don't think Storm Pillar is ever worth casting in PvE, just because the raw damage bonus is completely irrelevant. So I'd rather have a passive damage bonus. That's why I think this is better. Snap Freeze makes it so your cold damage do like a little bit extra damage if they're not affected by chill. I mean, it's whatever. It's mostly good for PvP. The next one that's really important is Elemental Empowerment. This is probably one of the best skills on the tree, just because when you hit something with the Arcane, they take 10% reduced mitigation, and because most of your AoE, in fact all of it except Icy Terrain, is Arcane damage, you know, you get the bonus for your group for pretty much every time you AoE on anything. And then a Silent Force, which I explained, is also very nice. The leftover points, you have 10 leftover points. I like to get critical power. When you crit, you gain 5% of your maximum action points. A lot of people like Reaper's Touch, and I think it's a good choice. If you're really close to your target, your arcane stuff, your arcane magic missile will do extra damage. 30% more is a lot, but I just don't think it's relevant. So I just think all I have to do is get more action points, get more recovery, knock more monsters off cliffs, and debuff the targets more often. And when you crit a foe, you get combat advantage for 4 seconds. This is pretty good. It seems to proc a lot when you're doing the AoE. So when you're doing the AoE, you do more damage, you get more action points, you get more daily use. So pretty typical stuff. As far as using the abilities, you know, you guys can watch the stream, you guys can watch, you know, VODs, you guys can watch prior videos if you really want to see it in action, but it's pretty self-explanatory. I just want to clarify what each of the abilities do. So Arcane Singularity is unlimited targets. It sucks the monsters up in a vacuum and then spits them out. When they're at the highest point, you can burst your shield to knock them all off, and this is typically the action that you do when you're knocking monsters off cliffs. It's shield popping in the middle of the Arcane Singularity. Now there's a few things that are important. It's important to use steal time as they're getting sucked up, because sometimes monsters like to cast things, and when they cast things, they might not be synced up with all the other monsters. Your goal is to sync them all up so they're at the absolute top all at the same time, so you can knock them off all at the same time, and steal time really helps with this, so it's very important that you use that appropriately. Icy Terrain, it's also an unlimited target AoE, just like Steal Time, just like Arcane Singularity, just like Shield. You pretty much drop it on the ground, and it lasts about 10 seconds, and with my amount of recovery, my cooldown is actually less than 10 seconds. The targets perpetually get chill stacks, so they move and attack slower, and eventually if they stay in it long enough, they'll all get frozen. So if they get frozen, you know, they do less damage to the group, and at the same time you're doing damage to them, you're generating action points, and you're going to generate more action points when you're attacking them if they're frozen, because they're going to be controlled and you have controlling action. So it's just kind of like a support based. Conduit Device is pretty much just single target. I mean, it is AoE, it gives you a lot of action point gain if you hit a lot of monsters with it, and it'll deal with the mitigation, but typically when we're doing like a boss encounter, I'll just Conduit Device the boss, so the melee or whoever's on the boss does a little bit more damage. But if you use it on the AoE pack on a large group of monsters, you're going to get a huge action point boost. And that's pretty much all there is to it. You know, your goal in this kind of role is to get as many action points as possible, use your daily as often as possible, control the ads as much as possible, and you know, throw them off a cliff. Pretty fun stuff. That's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys learned a few things, and hope you guys enjoy playing this type of wizard as much as I have. It is a very fun way to play this game, and you know, I've had a lot of enjoyment out of knocking monsters off cliffs. So I hope you guys have the same experience, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.